Hello, welcome to the Daily Bellringer. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the questions below in the description. Today we're going to be taking a look at Article 3, the Judicial Branch. Alright, so we've already covered Article 1 and Article 2, of course Article 1 being the legislative branch, Article 2 being the executive branch. Now we need to get into this last branch of government here with the Constitution in Article 3, and actually we're going to get through all three sections of this article. So Article 3, Section 1 basically just simply establishes the Supreme Court of the United States and the lower courts underneath it. Mainly we're going to focus on the Supreme Court. So as you can see here, the Supreme Court is comprised of 9 Supreme Court justices. Actually, that wasn't always the case. At one time there was only 6, but then very quickly they realized if we only have 6 judges, we can have a split decision. 3 judges decide one thing, 3 judges decide another. So they decided, let's increase it to an odd number here. So they increased it to 9 justices. Now, Supreme Court justices, of course, are appointed by the President of the United States. One of the biggest powers the President has. And one of the reasons that's one of the biggest powers is because Supreme Court justices serve for life, all right? So, or as long as they're on good behavior. I mean, yes, they may retire, but if they choose to, they can be on the Supreme Court until the day they die. I guess right now, the longest serving Supreme Court justice is Clarence Thomas. He was appointed back in 1991 by then President, the first President, H.W. Bush, all right, or George H.W. Bush. And so he's been on there for quite some time. And so again, a president's ideas, if he appoints, a conservative or a liberal judge, can far, exceed that president's influence in office. It goes for years and years afterwards. All right, so as it says, it establishes, of course, the Supreme Court, which is the last court of appeals, but below that, there are several other, courts, all right? So, for instance, we have the Court of Appeals. There's 13 appellate courts that sit below the Supreme Court, all right? And that's, again, called the Court of Appeals, all right? And then there's 94 federal judicial districts that are organized into 12 regional circuits, all right? So, again, it sets up this whole system of courts in which, if you have a decision kind of at the local level, it can then be appealed and taken all the way eventually to get to the Supreme Court. All right, so that is the Supreme Court and some of the courts that are underneath it. But then if we go to Section 2. So Article 3, Section 2 basically just sets, what kinds of cases is the Supreme Court going to hear? All right, so again, I could get into a lot of detail here and kind of just read through the entire section, but kind of an example here, one example it says in the Constitution is, all cases in which the United States is a party. All right, so in other words, if someone sues the United States, the Supreme Court could hear, that case. All right, all cases that involve one or more states or the citizens of different states. So again, they can settle, disputes between different states. But as I said before, basically here in Section 2, it really outlines and emphasizes that this is the last court of appeal. All right, it's the last resort. Once a decision gets all the way to the Supreme Court, again, one thing you don't really realize is how much money that is spent to get a case, all the way to the Supreme Court. So, just like an example I used to give in my class, say like someone sued me because they didn't like the fact maybe my dog was pooping in their yard. All right, so they sued me for that. And so, I would go to my local court. They would sue me like in a local court, and the court sided with me. And so maybe they didn't like that decision. So they appealed that decision and went to a higher court. And they appealed that decision and went to a higher court. Eventually, it could reach all the way to the Supreme Court. All right. But again, by that point, you spent so much in legal fees, so much money on that case, that probably cases like that are not going to make it there. So when you see cases that have made it to the Supreme Court, it's a pretty big deal because those cases have really been pushed all the way through. Also here in Section 2, they guarantee a trial by jury, all right, in criminal court. And this is a big thing you're going to see, here. Also in the Bill of Rights, you're going to see this guarantee of having a trial by jury in criminal courts, all right. But then lastly, the last section of Article 3 basically just lays out what treason is and the punishment for treason. So treason is the violation of allegiance owed to your own country. All right, so if you commit a crime that's kind of considered to be against the United States, this would be considered treason. I'm sure when they wrote this in the Constitution, they were probably keeping Benedict Arnold in mind. You may have heard of Benedict Arnold. He was a pretty significant commander for the Americans during the American Revolution, but then he kind of turned over to the British. All right, so actually, if you look in the description below, I will include a link to another video about Benedict Arnold, as well as a link to an article about different cases of treason in American history. All right, so hopefully you learned something there, and thanks for watching.